Hello! In this video I want to look at 8 maps that show the development of the global trading system. We're going to take a very wide span of human history from around 1200 BC up to 2013. These maps are taken from a variety of different places. I've tried to provide sources in the footnotes. Let's start with the cradle of Western civilization, the Fertile Crescent. This is the area in the present-day Middle East. It's the region where agriculture and early human civilizations such as ancient Egypt developed and flourished. Now the reason things start here is due to a diverse climate, diversity in terms of crops such as wheat, barley, self-pollinating plants, and also the importance of different species, for example domesticated animals such as cows, goats and pigs. This leads to the development of writing, the wheel, glass, agriculture, the use of irrigation, and it's the first time we see people going beyond hunter-gatherers into a settled civilization. Now, whilst there's similar stories in parts of modern-day India, China and the Andes, there's lots of anthropological evidence for informal trading in early human history, but it really was cities such as Babylon in the Fertile Crescent where we see for the first time evidence of organized marketplaces. And this is from 7000 to around 5000 BC. The second map looks at the Red Sea route. Now this is looking at the trade between ancient Egypt and the Indian civilization. Roman coins were discovered in modern India dating from around the 1st century BC. And what we're picking up on here is the fact that the sea is much better suited for transportation than land. You can cover and carry a lot more stuff. We can see evidence of trading posts in Eastern Africa, in particular Somalia, which would ship ivory and slaves. We see the Arabian Peninsula, which ships frankincense, wine, grain. We see coming down from Persia products such as wine and dates and gold. And then the trading points on the Indian coast are trading items such as cloth and spices. The third map is the Silk Road. Now this map is showing the land route. It's showing the flow of items such as silk and porcelain from China to the west. It really began to develop in 1114 BC up until about 1450. The Great Wall of China was built to protect this trading route. And while silk was moving from east to west, in the opposite direction you have items such as dates, saffron, nuts, myrrh, frankincense, and also from Egypt glass bottles. The reason why we see a lot of spices is because these are high value items but light and relatively easy to transport. The fourth map is also looking at the Silk Road but focuses on the maritime route. So this is showing different shipping lanes and how they developed over 3 distinct phases. And what we're really looking at here is the link between China, Southeast Asia, the Indonesian archipelago, the Indian subcontinent, the Arabian Peninsula, and also East Africa. These all then flow up through the Red Sea into Europe. By around 1250 AD, there is a well-developed trading system. Cities such as Genoa and Venice are serving as a European funnel for exotic goods, in particular spices. The fifth map makes things truly global and shows the age of discovery. We've seen that the land route to the Indies and the Far East was already taken, and the Italian merchants controlled the spice trade, and the Mediterranean and the Arabian peninsulas were hotly contested areas. The key issue then is how else can you get to the East Indies if not over this land route? Spain, under Christopher Columbus, decided to try to head west. The attempt was to circumnavigate the globe instead of finding the East Indies as expected, they discovered the West Indies, i.e. the Bahamas, and landed on the American continent in around 1492. By contrast, Portugal, under Vasco da Gama, tried to get around the Cape of Good Hope on the southern tip of the African continent. In order to do this, they needed to take a very wide berth in order to pick up fast currents that would propel them round into the Indian Ocean. Vasco da Gama successfully arrived in India in 1498. Note that it's the Portuguese attempt to take the wide berth around the Cape of Good Hope that ends up with the Portuguese discovery of Brazil. We then move into the era of free trade. The map here looks at some wonderful data work done by James Cheshire. It shows 18th century shipping routes that are plotted from the latitude and longitude positions derived from the ship's logs. This map is looking at British trade routes, and you can see a heavy dominance towards the eastern seaboard of the United States and also to India. Now, I said that I was going to show 7 maps. I'm slightly cheating because I'm going to show a couple of different versions of this map. This one's looking at the British trade routes. We can also look at Spanish trade routes, which we can see is a lot more focused on Florida and in particular Argentina as well. Note at this time, Spanish territory runs all the way up the eastern coast of the Americas, including Mexico, into Texas, Louisiana. We can also look at a Dutch trading route. This is a lot more focused on Guyana, which is near Venezuela, in terms of the Southern American continent. But more importantly, it's focused a lot more on Indonesia, where the Dutch had a virtual monopoly on trade coming out of Indonesia. The 7th map shows global oil flows up until pretty much the present day. Oil accounts for around 30 to 50% of a typical country's energy consumption. It's the world's biggest industry in terms of dollar value. The map is showing some of the main trade flows of oil across the globe, but it's also showing some of the main choke points. For example, the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, the Bab el-Mandeb, the Strait of Malacca, the Bosphorus, the Panama Canal. The point here is that it's not so much about oil per se. These are the geographic contours of trade routes, and these specific choke points and important points of geographical and geopolitical significance extend back thousands of years. They're the consequence of trying to move goods by boat on the world's current terrain. Now, I mentioned that we're going to look at 7 maps. There's actually 2 bonus ones that I also wanted to show you in this presentation. This is just a standard map of the world, and I wanted to demonstrate how remarkably smaller the world is due to modern trade flows and now increasingly due to aviation. On Saturday the 13th of April 2013, my brother Rick happened to be flying from Sydney to London Heathrow. Coincidentally, on Saturday 13th April 2013, I was leaving Heathrow for a flight to Los Angeles and onwards to Hawaii. I find it remarkable that within 24 hours, either myself or my brother had been on almost all lines of longitude in the world. And finally, I want to look at an extended global supply chain. This final map looks at how even simple products, such as a pencil, relies on items from all across the globe. A pencil depends on resources. For example, it uses cedar, which typically is taken from Oregon. The pencil mill is based in San Leandro in California. It needs graphite, which is taken and most commonly found in Sri Lanka. It utilizes clay from Mississippi. It uses candileax from Mexico. It uses rapeseed oil from Indonesia. It uses pumice from Italy. Now, this story is based on the very famous pamphlet I Pencil, which I recommend people read in more detail. But all I'm trying to demonstrate here is that in order to build a very simple household object, we rely on this integrated global supply chain and resources from across the world. Ultimately, trade is a form of technology, and the wider the opportunities for trade, the bigger the potential gains. Like any technology, it isn't unambiguously good and leads to issues and geopolitical problems that are around the world today. However, we can't increase living standards without technology, and we can't increase living standards without trade. As we've seen, global trade has a long history, and we can see it extend into the present day and into the future.